Hello to all you Bible students out there. Thanks for joining me today for our Bible study through Psalm 120. We made it through the longest chapter in the Bible. I think we can make it through this one. Our free PDF is available on the website at tobelikechrist.com, and there's a link down in the description to that. Psalm 120, as far as our author, we don't have an author listed or named in the text, so that's an unknown for today. Also, I'm not aware of any New Testament references to Psalm 120. One big theme today, and that's that we're going to talk about a man who was crying out to the Lord for help because he was being oppressed by the slander and the lies of his adversaries. So he asked God to help him with that situation. One definition also today, and that's the Song of Ascents or Songs of Ascent. This particular psalm, as we open it up and look at verse 1, you'll see it's a psalm of ascent. What exactly does that mean? Well, I'm not sure that we know exactly, but many people believe that it's a label that was applied to psalms that the people of Israel sang as they were going up to Jerusalem for the feast days or the special holy days that were commanded in God's law. The city of Jerusalem was actually up on a hill, and so the people, as they were going to Jerusalem, would literally be ascending, elevation-wise. And so that's maybe why these are called the Psalms of Ascent. As they're going up, as they're ascending, they're singing. Psalm 120 is 169 verses, shorter than our last chapter. And so our outline has just 7 verses today, and I have entitled it Peace versus War, talking about people who seek peace versus people who are constantly wanting to fight. Psalm 120 presents us, as I mentioned, with this man who's in distress, and he calls out to the Lord for help with all of his troubles, and he's confident that the Lord hears him and is going to help him. He was being attacked with vicious words by people who had lying lips and deceitful tongues. He says, or he concludes, that God is going to avenge him against these liars, and in his words, he says that they're going to feel the sharp arrows of the Lord's judgment. Now, even though the psalmist has confidence that God is going to help him, he still bemoans the fact that he has to live in a world where these liars and slanderers live amongst him. He says it's like he lived in a barbarian land. He mentions the place Makesh and Kedar as if these places were like uncivilized lands. And it was as if he was living in an uncivilized society because he had to live amongst all these liars and slanderers and people who were bearing false witness about him. He wrote, quote, "Too long have I had my dwelling amongst those who hate peace," in verse 6. He didn't want to fight with these men, but these men were always looking for a fight. And the psalmist knew that only God was going to be able to give him peace from these people while he lived amongst them, people who were just bent on making war and trouble constantly. And let's talk about that a little bit more in our application section. Followers of Jesus should be peaceful whenever possible. We shouldn't be picking fights all the time. We shouldn't be warmongers either in national affairs or in private affairs. And we shouldn't become combative every time our blood pressure comes up. And I know that can be hard. The men who were oppressing the psalmist loved war. They loved fighting. But as disciples of Jesus's, we should love peace. And we should be striving for peace with other people whenever possible. Paul writes about this in Romans chapter 12, verse 17 and 18, and I'll read that. "Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men." There's a big difference between someone who loves to fight for fighting's sake or for their own selfish interests and someone who loves peace but will fight if it's absolutely necessary and when it's time to take a stand for righteousness. Christians should be in the latter group.